Good afternoon and welcome to the Sustainable Ports and Goods Movement webinar presented by South Shore Clean Cities. My name is Ryan Lisek. I'm the project manager for South Shore Clean Cities, and I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and extend a special thank you to our speakers. Just a reminder, all attendees are on listen-only mode, and today's webinar will be recorded and shared on the South Shore Clean Cities resources page on our website. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the chat box in the panel on the right of your screen. If you have any questions for a specific speaker, please address them accordingly. We will be monitoring the questions throughout the webinar and will address them as we are able. I would like to introduce today's speakers. First, we have Shawn Seals, Senior Environmental Manager for the Indiana Department of Environmental Management, also known as IDEM, who will discuss upcoming funding opportunities through the Indiana Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Fund and the DERA option. Shawn will also highlight some successful Port of Indiana Burns Harbor projects that were previously awarded. We will then move on to the roundtable discussion with the following speakers discussing a variety of sustainable options available for ports and goods movement operations. First, we're going to have Joe Stack. He is the Industrial Account Executive for Rail and Marine. Next, we have Ian Hirt. He is the Port Director for the Port of Indiana Burns Harbor. After him, we have Andrew Sargis, Chief of Operations for Wendella Tours and Cruises. And once again, thank you all for participating in this webinar. We really appreciate it. But first, here's a little bit about South Shore Clean Cities. South Shore Clean Cities is headquartered in beautiful St. John, Indiana. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We are designated as the 71st Clean Cities Coalition on June 15th, 1999. South Shore Clean Cities is one of the U.S. Department of Energy's more than 75 Clean Cities coalitions across the country. And as of February 1st, we're the only Department of Energy certified coalition in the state of Indiana. In the last decade alone, South Shore Clean Cities members have reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 607,000 tons and displaced more than 93 million gas gallons. In 2020, South Shore Clean Cities stakeholders were awarded $9.3 million in grant dollars, some of which will be highlighted today. So how do we do it? South Shore Clean Cities works with several partners, including IDEM, to provide a grant and funding opportunities while building relationships with our stakeholders. The success of the emission reduction projects that we are able to achieve come from working with the incredible leaders and experts in the transportation industry, including the ones that are participating today. We are constantly looking at the big picture in order to make the greatest impact in reducing emissions and lessening our dependence on imported oil. South Shore Clean Cities also provides the following support services to our members and partners: educational fuel and technology workshops, training, seminars, and webinars, kind of like the one we're doing today. We also provide grant writing services. We also provide grant administration and support, fleet audits, and emission quantifications. And that is really the groundwork that is led to all the success, is getting involved with our Green Fleet program. And then we also have our different connections with vendors offering sustainable transportation options. We have the experience and the proven record that can lead to the success for your projects. If you're looking for ways to improve your fleet's performance or need assistance, please contact me at any time. My contact information is presented on the slide. Just as a reminder, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please type them in the chat box on your screen. We'll address those later in the webinar. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Shawn Seals, who is the Senior Environmental Management for IDEM and the DieselWise Indiana Administrator for the DieselWise program. Shawn, go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Ryan. And good, I guess it's afternoon, everyone. I look forward to chatting with you a little bit about sustainable ports and goods movement here in Indiana. And as Ryan mentioned, a lot of times when we would have these conversations with our friends from South Shore Clean Cities, we were really focused on one port. But now, because of the change with the DOE association, if you will, and them leaning towards the entire state, we're actually going to be talking about possible projects for all 3 ports in Indiana. So I hope there are some folks from all of our ports. So we're going to touch a little bit on the 2021 DieselWise Indiana and Volkswagen grants. And as noted, I am the DieselWise Indiana Administrator. I'm also the administrator of the Indiana Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust Program. So we've got a lot of exciting opportunities and look forward to sharing some of that stuff with you now. So let's talk a little bit about the Indiana Clean Diesel Coalition. The coalition in large part has been motivated and progressed through IDEM and our partnership with South Shore Clean Cities. We've worked collaboratively on a lot of projects since probably around the year 2000. It actually started with a little program that was called the Northwest Indiana Diesel Emission Reduction Initiative. So that takes us back quite a ways. Doing this for 21 years, we've all developed a pretty good amount of experience with what it takes to have some successful diesel emission reduction programs. One of the things that's also good about the coalition is we share mutual goals, and those goals have always been to improve air quality and the quality of life in Indiana. It's often discussed, the concept of improving air quality, but it's often forgotten that by improving air quality, we're also improving the quality of life for those around us. And the coalition has always had a really nice and clear focus on teamwork and open communication that allows us to thrive through various challenges. COVID being a recent challenge, we talk to each other quite regularly on the phone or via Zoom or whatever the method might be, as opposed to a lot of the face-to-face meetings we used to have to keep the coalition moving forward. So you'll notice as we get into a couple more slides here, and I think this slide kind of touches on the real point. Why is there a non-road focus, if you will, on the DERA option? And I think in large part it's because we all know that diesel engines are workhorses. They're the workhorses of the nation. They're commonly called that. And really when it boils down to is the hours of use and useful life and the duty cycles in particular of non-road diesel engines are generally much higher than the on-road diesel sector. And that legacy fleet of these non-road diesel engines continues to emit a large amount of nitrogen oxides, particulate matter, and air toxics, which are linked to premature deaths, asthma attacks, lost work days, and several other health impacts every year. By once again improving air quality, we can thereby improve that quality of life and keep people out of the hospitals and healthy and wise. So one of the things I think that's really interesting about the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust is that it actually allowed for us to kind of use some of those Volkswagen funds as a I guess I would call it a match, if you will, or an overmatch. We can combine the Volkswagen program funds with our US EPA DERA-based programs. And for those who aren't familiar with the DERA program, in short, it's the Diesel Emission Reduction Act. It is a clean diesel program that's administered through US EPA. And one of the things that is nice about the combination of the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust and DERA is that it provides us a lot more flexibility than the than the Volkswagen program does by itself. The Volkswagen program is very focused on emission reduction technologies that are not always best suited towards the non-road sector. So having the capacity to put some of our funding in the DERA option gives us a great opportunity to make a difference at Indiana ports. So we've recently completed 2 rounds of Volkswagen Mitigation Trust programming. This slide will talk a little about round 1. The next slide will talk a little about round 2. And what you see here with round 1 is I think in round 1 we had roughly $9.83 million that was available and was awarded for projects. Now the on-road and non-road program actually does have programming and funding available for non-road programs that could be applicable to the ports. But it also encompasses a lot of on-road opportunities as well, things like school buses and refuse haulers. So in 2019, we awarded 34. I believe we received somewhere in the range of 60 to 70 applications. We were able to award 34 of those for a total of $9.8 million. And we actually were able to improve 179 pieces of equipment. So that was pretty exciting for us. And I think one thing here, although I'm not an active participating member of South Shore Clean Cities by any means, one of the things I think is important to note, because they are sponsoring such a great event here today, is the success that they have had partnering with us on a lot of these projects, whether they're DERA or Volkswagen. So of those 34 projects, as you can see to the right in red, 27 of them actually rolled through South Shore Clean Cities for a total of $6.9 million, and 118 of the 179 actually were the projects that were funded were brought to our attention through applications from South Shore Clean Cities. Now, in round 1 of the DERA option, which was awarded in early 2020, we had, this is, if you'll recall, this is when COVID really started making an impact on folks as we started to roll through the year. So we did, the number of applications was not necessarily as strong as we would have expected. We were able to award 5 quality projects for a total of $1.3 million. And we improved 6 pieces of equipment. And although that may sound kind of small compared to 179 in the section above, remember this is focused on non-road equipment, 6 pieces of equipment for $1.3 million. So you can do the math and determine what the value of each one of those projects really is. And once again, when we look at the South Shore Clean Cities success, you'll see that they were highly successful in that round 1 on the DERA option side. And then in 2020, late 2020 and early 2021, we completed the awarding of our round 2 programs. So round 2 on-road, non-road, once again, we put about $9.83 million on the street. And we got some good applications in the on-road and non-road round, but we kind of felt like we could have maybe had some better ones. So we ended up awarding $6.15 million of that 9.8. It was 17 projects that improved 193 pieces of equipment or vehicles. And you'll see once again, if you look to the right, the South Shore Clean City success rate was pretty high in that round 2 of the on-road and non-road program. And then earlier this year, we finalized and began awarding the round 2 DERA option projects. Those funding agreements have just gone out the door for the most part. So those projects are all just about ready to get started. And we had a really good response in comparison to round 1. We, I believe, received 12 or 13 applications and were able to award 6 good quality projects for a total of about $2.25 million. And once again, 17 pieces of equipment for 2.25. You can do the math. These are pretty good projects, and many of them are pretty high priced projects too. The types of projects that are really hard maybe to go it alone. When you have a $3 million project, but you can get $750,000 from another entity like the DERA option program, it makes that program a little bit more feasible for you. As you can see, they were highly successful at South Shore Clean Cities when it came to round 2 of the DERA option. Now, most people are here to talk about funding opportunities, or at least to wonder about funding opportunities, and that's what I'm here to kind of share with you. At this point in time, there are not any programs currently open, but obviously I know when they're coming. We're going to have round 3 of both of the programs we've talked about already, the on-road and non-road program, as well as the DERA option program. So in the spring of 2021, I believe probably March or April, I will be putting on the street a request for proposals that will include, once again, about $9.8 million. It could actually be a little bit more than that, depending upon if we have any available funding from rounds 1 or 2 that we want to roll into round 3. So at least $9.8 million will be available. And the grant ranges have typically been $50,000 to $750,000. That is something that is always subject to change. We kind of get a feel for what it really is like at that point in time, maybe have a feel for what types of projects we might be envisioning or might be expecting an application. So those numbers could change a little bit. And then in the fall of this year, probably around September-ish, I believe, I'll be putting on the street the Dieselwise Indiana with Volkswagen DERA option program. And this is the one I spoke of earlier that has a little bit more flexibility than the Volkswagen program that you see that's kind of launching in the spring because it is tied to our US EPA DERA program. So the DERA program will allow, and I think the best example or some of the best types of examples are in the on-road and non-road program. It's very specifically driven by the Volkswagen consent decree. And in large part, that requires vehicles in the non-road sector in large part to be either repowered or replaced with all electric equipment. And although we would all love to be able to make that transition, there are some types of duty cycles that simply are not ready for an all electric component. And that's where the Dieselwise Indiana with DERA option program has its real strength. And that is that it doesn't have to be an all electric alternative. It can be, but it can also be a clean diesel. It can be an alternative fuel, a lot more flexibility in that program. Once again, our intent is to put around $1.8 million on the street, and the grant range there will probably be somewhere in the range of $50,000 to $1 million per award. So we thought it would be kind of important to sort of point out the types of projects that we have awarded through the Dieselwise Indiana program, the Volkswagen program, the Dieselwise with Volkswagen DERA option program, all the different programs we've had over the years. So folks can kind of look at these types of projects and say, yeah, maybe that does actually fit into my fleet. So one of the projects that was recently awarded was the transition of an old Tier 3 front end loader to a Tier 4 final front end loader. What you'll see here, I think, and these are the things I think are important to point out. Not only is it a cleaner piece of equipment, obviously, but take a look at the fuel consumption of one versus the other, if you will. We're talking about almost 12,000 gallons annually down to around 3,000 gallons annually. That's money in your pocket. That's important, and that's something we think is really valuable, not only the emission reduction component. Another project that was awarded recently, and we have one that's kind of similar to this that I'll touch on briefly. The concept in the ports, lots of rail activity in all of our Indiana ports, and moving those rail cars is a pretty strenuous job. There is now technology out there that is both clean diesel and all electric that can move those rail cars in place of a switcher locomotive. So what we actually have on this slide in front of us is a project that we funded that replaced an old unregulated rail car mover on the left with an all electric rail car mover here in 2020 on the right. Perfectly capable of doing all of the important work. But it's doing it with an all-electric piece of technology. Now, I will say, and I apologize, but I will say that it's similar to that project we were just talking about. We did also recently award a project that's a little bit more traditional, and that is a project that is similar in regard to the rail activity. It is the replacement of an old unregulated switcher locomotive with a new Tier 4 clean diesel rail car mover. So although the pieces of technology might look different on the screen if they were pictured here, the concept is the same and the emission reduction potential is even more impressive than these would be. Another recently awarded project through the DERA option is for articulated trucks. These are sort of rare, kind of challenging pieces of equipment to envision where they fit in a daily activity at some ports. A lot of times you'll picture these more at a mine than you will at a port, but we know that these types of articulated trucks exist in the ports of Indiana, and they're another great opportunity for emission reduction potential. They're not the cheapest trucks in the world by any means, and through the DERA option, we're able to really help offset some of those costs for you all. And I think one of the things that's really also important, and I keep drawing your attention to this because I'm a bottom line kind of guy, and when you're talking about moving from 95,000 gallons of fuel down to 29,000 gallons of fuel, once again, that could be money in your pocket. And then the last type of project, and we've got a lot of other project opportunities, but just the last one we want to draw a little attention to because they're pretty common also across Indiana ports are drayage trucks. And as many know, drayage trucks are nothing more than a Class 8 truck that's moving bulk or containers or various bits of commodities between the port and maybe intermodal rail facilities, maybe distribution centers, or other locations that are reasonably close to the port itself. These types of projects are one of the few on-road projects, I guess I would say, that exist but can be funded through the use of either the Dieselwise program or the Volkswagen program. So if this is something that might fit in your fleet, by all means consider taking a look at those. And then obviously the final slide for me, and this is nothing more than my contact information and the website. Top website is the Dieselwise Indiana website, which focuses really on the work that we do through Dieselwise Indiana. You'll be able to find some links, I believe, to the Volkswagen site from there also, which will drill down into that a little bit more. Items website, of course, and then my direct dial contact information. Like many of you, as you can see, I am not broadcasting from an office. So remote work is the way that we're doing our business as well. So feel free to call that number. And if you get me, great. If you don't, I'll get back with you as soon as I can. And that's all I have to share today. So I'm going to go on mute now and pass it back to Ryan.
Thank you very much, Shawn. I appreciate it. And great presentation and great summary. Next part here is I'd now like to play a video highlighting the successful US EPA DERA grant projects that South Shore Clean Cities assisted our members and partners with. South Shore Clean Cities wrote the successful $1.1 million grant application for the Port of Indiana Burns Harbor, Wendella Boats, who you will hear from today, along with Homa Disposal and Welsh Ready Mix.
South Shore Clean Cities is one of over 100 Clean Cities coalitions designated by the U.S. Department of Energy. Our goal and mission is to reduce imported oil and promote domestic fuels here in northern Indiana. Strictly, we work on transportation and emission-related types of projects. In 2019, South Shore Clean Cities wrote a successful $1.1 million grant application that assisted 4 of our members through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, or DERA, grant program. Building and Moving America is a $4.3 million project that uses engine and vehicle replacements to reduce diesel emissions in the goods movement sector in the Northwest Indiana and Chicago region. Being able to assist these local companies with grant funding to improve their operations and reduce their emissions, particularly in areas with high sensitive populations that aren't meeting air quality standards, it benefits everyone.
So here at the Port of Indiana Burns Harbor, we handle about 2.7 million tons of cargo last year. And that cargo comes in by ocean-going ships. We have approximately 28 companies that are doing something with moving cargo, and traditionally that's been done with diesel-powered equipment. And so what we've been trying to do is upgrade the equipment. The newer engines are much more eco-friendly. And then we're also trying to go to electric as much as we can. That's what we'd really like to try and do throughout the port, through all these different companies, and we're working with them to try and make that happen. And South Shore Clean Cities is always there, right there with us to help in that regard as well.
We started pursuing compressed natural gas in 2010. At that time, the price of diesel was fluctuating a lot, and the price of natural gas had been pretty consistent. It also goes along with one of our core values. One of our core values is stewardship. We feel that we're stewards of our environment, and that's why we've gotten heavily involved in recycling and natural gas. We believe we're responsible for the environment, and so for us to be able to supply a truck that runs on a cleaner burning fuel follows one of our core values.
I do think people would be surprised that we're involved in sustainable transportation. Sustainability is important because it's pretty much the future of construction. We've been seeing more and more green projects going on, and both for our employees and also for the company's sake, we want to be busy and we want to protect the environment. Around 2012, when we started coming out of the recession, we were looking to buy some new trucks, and we were trying to be sustainable in what we were looking at, and that's when we started looking at clean diesel.
Wendella Tours and Cruises is a fleet of passenger vessels that operates on the Chicago River and Lake Michigan. We perform everything from architecture tours, we act as a private event venue, and we also own and operate the Chicago Water Taxi, which is a fleet of ferries that shuttle people along the Chicago River to various destinations and neighborhoods throughout the city. It is important to Wendella to reduce emissions because it is consistent with the company's sustainability efforts. Wendella has made the decision, the conscious decision, to be a better neighbor and a better citizen in the city of Chicago by focusing primarily not just on safety and security, but by operating in the most sustainable methods possible. That includes everything from idle reduction to taking advantage of new and improved technologies, such as frequent repowers of our vessels. We most likely would not have been able to make these improvements without the DERA grants, mainly because we are private transportation, we are non-subsidized. So it's incredibly difficult for the Chicago Water Taxi fleet to compete with different subsidized modes of transit. South Shore Clean Cities was our grant sponsor. They wrote the grant, they assisted with managing the grant. It was a very smooth process. It honestly didn't take much of our time. They were very thorough, very informative, and we were very confident moving through the grant management process with South Shore Clean Cities.
I would recommend South Shore Clean Cities. They were great to work with. We've used them before, and they've always been easy to work with.
South Shore Clean Cities was pretty much a one-stop shop for us. They did virtually all of the paperwork, helped us every step of the way through the process, and quite frankly made it very simple on Welsh Ready Mix.
I find working with South Shore Clean Cities to be a real pleasure. They are so helpful in terms of making life easy for you as an organization. The challenge with a lot of environmental issues is finding the time to tackle it properly. And South Shore Clean Cities is always there to help. South Shore Clean Cities makes it so easy that it really takes up very little additional time, and I find them to be an absolutely wonderful resource.
South Shore Clean Cities is proud to lead the Building and Moving America project with our partners. We hope others will follow their example and adopt sustainable transportation options whenever possible.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, we're going to start getting into our roundtable discussion, and I'd like to welcome our speakers and start introducing them one by one. First off, we're going to have Joe Stack with Cummins. Cummins was founded in 1919 in Columbus, Indiana, where this global headquarters still remains today in the great Hoosier State. The global company is focused on bringing right technology solutions at the right time to its markets and providing the most efficient, high-performing, and most reliable technologies available. These include advanced diesel, natural gas, hybrid, electric, fuel cell, and other technologies currently under development, and they certainly have their hand in everything related to energy generation. Next, we have Ian Hirt. He's the Port Director for the Port of Indiana, Burns Harbor. The Port of Indiana is America's premier and inland port system, operating 3 ports on the Ohio River and Lake Michigan. The state's 3-port system serves the world's most productive industrial and agricultural regions. Finally, we have Andrew Sargis, Chief of Operations for Wendella Tours and Cruises. For 80 years, Wendella has provided millions of visitors and commuters an opportunity to experience Chicago in a unique way. Wendella now operates 8 vessels, providing several tours and specialty cruises, private events, and the Chicago Water Taxi Service. Thank you all, gentlemen, very much for joining us today. Please go ahead and turn on your webcams and unmute yourself. So getting right into it, this question is for Joe. Joe, can you give us a little background on Cummins' interest in Tier 4 engines and the switcher locomotive industry? And you know, this is one of the industries that is very well known for using antiquated, outdated equipment.
Sure, Ryan, thank you. Yeah, Cummins, we've been, our goal with Tier 4 in general has been to build a fully integrated system from intake to exhaust that improves combustion technology, reduces NOx emissions and particulate matter, and maintains the reliability that Cummins has had on our engines, historically speaking, all while reducing fuel consumption. We got involved in the switcher industry, as I'm sure some of you know, quite a few years ago. Cummins provided the engines for a few OEMs for multi-engine genset switchers, Tier 2, Tier 3, and there are some Tier 4 final ones out there. It's been successful, and it's an industry that Cummins is putting a lot of emphasis on in the coming years. It seems to be the one industry that is a little bit maybe lagging behind the rest of the transportation industry as far as getting up to speed with emission levels.
All right. This next question is for Ian. Ian, what kind of fleet operations are currently running at the port, all 3 locations?
Sure, Ryan. So there's an old saying in the port industry, when you've seen one port, you've seen one port. So they're all a bit different. Throughout the country, we all do different things. There's a lot of similarities in Indiana. Obviously, agriculture is a big part of the state's economy. Up here in the north, steel is very important, as well as our port in Jeffersonville. But one thing that we all share in common is we're all kind of running this kind of 5 big same modes of transporting goods. So I look at like company vehicles, forklifts and payloaders, semi-trucks, drayage trucks, material handlers, cranes, and then the locomotive side as well, the track mobile type stuff. So, you know, pretty much every port's going to be running some combination of those 5 types of things, probably all 5, if not a couple more. And, you know, it's really, from where I sit, it's really important just to try and make sure that our companies are running the most recent technologically advanced pieces of equipment that they can. So that's what we're here for today.
All right, thank you. Now, Andrew, can you go over the different type of fleet operations that are taking place with Wendella?
Sure, thanks, Ryan. So Wendella started in 1935 in Chicago, was the city's first passenger vessel that was specifically commuter and consumer oriented, really focusing on tours and events. Since then, obviously, the fleet has evolved and grown a lot. We now have actually up to 10 vessels, 5 of which are Chicago water taxis. And that is the transportation side of our business. The water taxis are the yellow and black branded boats that you might see if you come to downtown Chicago. They operate on all 3 branches of the Chicago River. One of the Chicago water taxis' major stops, we have 7 stops on all 3 branches. One of our major stops is in between Ogilvie and Union Station at Madison Street. So the overwhelming amount of our clientele, our commuter clientele, are people living in the suburbs, north, south, and west sides of the cities, who come into Union and Ogilvie Station, and then the water taxi then takes them to their place of business, takes them to where they're going to go shopping or where they're going to go to see some new art at the museum. And really, Wendella, which was originally doing tours and cruises, started the water taxi in the 90s. And really, this was a result of realizing that Ogilvie and Union Station in the loop, it was hard to get that last mile from the station to your place of business, especially if you worked in River North or worked in the East Loop. And it's been wildly successful. And in 2019, just the water taxi side of the business took over 400,000 riders on the Chicago River. Obviously, COVID has been devastating to our business, but we are hopeful. We hear a lot of people that can't wait to return to the office or go traveling again. So we're holding off for this next year, and we see some light at the end of the tunnel here.
Absolutely, and it's coming, and certainly is a lakefront treasure with everything that you guys have going on down there or up there. Getting back to Joe, with one of what people don't see behind the scenes as far as a engine manufacturer, can you give us a little bit more information on the Tier 4 final engine certification and why it's important to the locomotive industry for Cummins?
For sure. So currently, we have Tier 4 in the locomotive industry and what I'll call the rail car mover world. We offer a product up to 1,000 horsepower, many different engine configurations that are used as what we generically call switcher rail locomotives, right? Even though they're not EPA class switch. The EPA class switch certification is something that comes, we actually had it on our task bar to have up to 1,500 horsepower switch rail done by Q2 of 2021, but unfortunately COVID kind of knocked that back about 6 months. So right now we're projecting it for Q1 2022, but it'll give us a product up to 1,500 horsepower. We've been really successful in the line haul with the 95 liter. I'm sure you've seen that floating around a little bit if you're in the Chicago area. And it's an opportunity for sure. And what we're trying to develop is a complete repower package. A lot of these locomotives were built, 1950 to 1970, and they're, as we all know, if you work in the locomotive industry, they don't get replaced with new product like a truck does. A lot of times they get rebuilt, taken down the platform and built back up. And our goal is to partner with some people and have a complete drop-in product that can be a one-stop shop up to 1,500 horsepower for switch rail.
Absolutely, and that's extremely important when you're moving millions of pounds of break bulk material or steel coils, especially here in the ports. So those kind of lower horsepower options don't fit across the board, and those are extremely important, especially when we're talking about 1950 engines that we see every day.
Correct.
Getting over back to Mr. Hirt, why is reducing emissions at the port so important?
Well, we've got one planet, Ryan, so it kind of starts with that, you know. It really, the air quality, future generations, to me, it starts with that. And then, when we take it a step further, and kind of a thing about what I want to make sure I get across today is South Shore Clean Cities and IDEM. I mean, what they're working to do is they can make your company better. They can get better pieces of equipment into your facility so that your employees are driving forklifts that have new seats in them. I mean, there's safety things, there's emissions. It can help your company's bottom line. Equipment needs to be replaced. Apparently, locomotives run a lot longer than forklifts and payloaders because there's not too many 1950 forklifts running around out there. But equipment needs to be replaced, and by utilizing the resources of South Shore Clean Cities and IDEM to make it more affordable for your company, it's going to be better for your employees. Your employees are going to be happier. Everyone likes to drive a new forklift, drive a new material handler. It runs better, less maintenance, better fuel consumption, like Shawn mentioned. So it's really, to me, it's a no-brainer. If you're looking to expand, you're looking to grow, and you need some new equipment, this is a great opportunity for you.
Absolutely, especially on the new pieces of equipment, because we hear it time and time again. It's got to make financial sense, and really where the decision making comes from is they wouldn't be looking at any kind of new equipment unless there was funding available, because they could go buy something used for a lot less. But especially the operators love it. They're more excited to drive a new piece of equipment at work than getting a new car. So they spend more time working than driving their car. Absolutely. Going back to Andrew, what are some of the past projects that your company has been awarded through the different DERA programs?
So thanks, Ryan. We've been working with the DERA program for a few years now. It's a program that we obviously love, and I would go to bat for it every day if I could. A big difference between our fleet and most of the transit fleets in the country, especially the Great Lakes, is that with the exception of the DERA grants, these one-off DERA grants, we are not subsidized. So, for example, Put-in-Bay, Traverse City, Mackinac, these ferry systems are subsidized. Wendella's water taxi, on the other hand, is largely funded by the architecture tours and the cruises that Wendella runs. So the result of that is that budgets are very tight. Capital upgrades, budgets for those are tighter than they are for the larger vessels, which tend to be more profitable. Transportation is not as profitable. So the DERA grant's really a lifeline for us to be able to improve our fleets. And we've repowered 3 vessels in the last 7 years through the DERA program, including one vessel that was built in 1962 and had World War II surplus Detroit diesel engines. These 3 boats that we've repowered they were all cost shares, obviously, and they have resulted in a combined reduction of over 350 tons a year of greenhouse gas emissions based on the EPA's diesel emissions quantifier calculator. Obviously, a large reduction in particulate matter emissions, reduced fuel consumption 10 to 15%, and providing a health benefit of over $300,000 a year based on particulate matter reduction, which, if spread over the course of a 30-year engine lifetime, is over $9 million. So I think these numbers are impressive, but even if you don't think those numbers are impressive, imagine, though, the cumulative effect of all these marginal gains if we have fleets repowering, going to that next tier engine. And also the DERA grant, it does have the Buy America requirements. So these dollars are going back into the local economy. We're going to, for our repowers, we've gone to John Deere. The labor has been done at a shipyard on Lake Michigan in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. It has been a great program, and it really has allowed us to lower our carbon footprint through repowers. But even for subsidized entities that aren't Wendella, like the ferries in Washington Island or Beaver Island out in Duluth, these DERA grants, they're eligible for them too. And once again, the cumulative effect of all these operators repower is a significant mitigation of greenhouse gases, particulate matter, and as you can see, huge health benefits. So,
absolutely. And you know, your equipment is, once it starts up for the day, it doesn't shut down, and it more operates as a genset, as everything that's powered coming off that engine. So you have some great usage, and it's a lot more cost effective to go about with the repowers than a total boat replacement. So that's very good stats. Thank you, Andrew. Getting back to Joe. Joe, now we're talking about the different Tier 4 final options from Cummins for the locomotive side. These different fleets that are operating in the ports and intermodal facilities, why is this important? Why should they be looking at it to have that, what you call a drop-in repower system?
Well, number one, obviously the platform is going to be much more cost effective than purchasing a brand new locomotive to repower with a Tier 4 final product. But I mean, even if we were to go from Tier 2, which a lot of these locomotives are actually non-tier, but from Tier 2 to Tier 4, we're getting an 80% reduction in particulate matter and a 50% reduction in NOx. I mean, that's, as Shawn said earlier, that's smog, that's air pollution. A lot of these ports and intermodal facilities are in very well populated areas. I mean, people live, you know, right around there. And, you know, quite frankly, all the trucks that are going in and out of there after stuff gets unloaded have been Tier 4 for, you know, the on-road equivalent of Tier 4 for years. Transit buses, public transportation is all, you know, equivalent of Tier 4 or alternative fuel or hybrid electric. We're, you know, in the non-road, the general non-road world, we've been, the EPA's allowed us to lag a little bit, and these engines are workhorses. I mean, these, you know, we have locomotive engines that I know of that run 7,000 plus hours a year. I mean, if you do the math, there's not much more than 7,000 hours in a year. You know, it's not, and to clean up, I mean, even to be generous and give the assumption that what they're running now is Tier 2 grade, which I could guarantee you is average out much lower than that. 80% reduction. I mean, their employees are going to be healthier. Their people are going to get sick less. You know, it's you know, and quite frankly, from a customer standpoint, it's beneficial because our Tier 4 engines actually have lower maintenance costs, have significantly less oil usage than a legacy engine, and about a 20% fuel cost reduction year over year. So yeah, there is some initial investment to get you there, but the benefits of it, you know, if you're going to get another 25, 30 years out of it, are there for you in the long run.
Absolutely. Those are the workhorses and the backbone of a lot of the goods movement stuff that's going around Chicago, Indiana, of course. Thank you very much. Ian, one last question for you. Can you tell us about some of the upcoming or past projects that you are particularly proud of? Excuse me.
You know, Ryan, I'm really proud of all of our tenants who have taken the initiative to get out there and try and make something happen. And even if they haven't been successful, that they, you know, got in the game and gave it a try. Over the last few years, approximately 25% of our tenants here at Burns Harbor, we've got about 25 tenants, and about 25% of them have been successful in getting grant funding to upgrade their equipment. So I'm really, really proud of them for you know, putting that foot forward. And on a personal note, I used to be in private industry, and that's where I first learned of South Shore Clean Cities and was able to get some new engines in our forklifts at the time, get some new forklifts. So, you know, the one thing I'm proud of is I was able to help my company's bottom line and get my employees in better pieces of equipment. And, you know, I'm really proud of that fact.
Awesome. Now, Andrew, what is the need for emission reductions in your fleet?
So the need for emissions reduction in the current Wendella fleet, which is a situation that most of, so I'm speaking from the domestic passenger vessel industry, not barges or towing, but for the domestic passenger vessel fleet, most of the vessels in the fleet nationwide and on the Great Lakes are actually not transportation. They are sightseeing, dinner boats, casino boats, you know, things of that nature. Now, when it comes to the transportation side, we've gotten a great response from those administering these grants to use for the transportation side. For the entertainment side, we have reached out for these grants before and have scored very poorly. And we understand why. These are transportation-oriented grants. However, one of the issues that we're seeing is that COVID has decimated the industry. And until it recovers, the appetite for big capital expenditures for repowers will be pretty low. And in 2018 and 2019, when the economy was hot, we were seeing all sorts of private operators forego conventional diesel engine repowers for electric repowers, hybrid repowers, and a lot of these projects were stopped dead in their tracks when COVID hit. And the concern is that the emissions reduction in our fleet and also nationwide has been hurt by COVID, and DERA grants can assist in getting those kind of restarted again. But right now, the way they're scored is you know, it seems that they're really focused on transportation and public entities, and we do understand why. Sometimes it's not palatable to give public dollars to private entities. However, from a public health and emissions reduction standpoint, to allow that scoring, to allow for excursion vessels, whale watchers, fishing boats, not necessarily transportation to score higher, I think would have a larger impact on emissions reduction in our fleet, but also nationwide. In terms of our fleet, our transportation fleet has now been fully repowered. So the next stop would be our sightseeing boats. Unfortunately, as of so far, we have not gotten a great reception when it comes to the DERA grants for the sightseeing boats. But we're gonna keep trying, because we do believe there's a major public benefit to repowering these boats as well.
Some would argue you carry the most important cargo as it sits right now. Right?
Yep.
Thank you. Once again, everyone, please feel free to ask your questions in the top right-hand corner. Please go ahead and type those in. We have a question for Mr. Seals. Mr. Seals, just to verify one thing, the DERA option funding will be coming out this fall of 2021 and not 2022, correct?
That is correct. As I said, probably September-ish is what I'm looking at as a rollout date.
Okay, thank you very much. We have one question, and this is open to everyone. Why do you feel collaboration is so important to move clean mobility forward in our state or the Midwest? Go ahead and hit it on the head if you want to talk about it.
Well, I think, you know, we need to work with companies like Cummins to make sure that they're getting the products out there, and work with South Shore Clean Cities to help, you know, obtain the funding via organizations like IDEM and EPA or whomever it might be. So we all really need to work together, and, you know, part of that is sharing information, letting everyone know that these opportunities are out there. I think that's one of South Shore Clean City's biggest challenges, probably, is spreading the word and spreading the gospel that, hey, there's money out there, and it's not that hard to get, and we're here to help you get it. So I think that all kind of falls under the collaboration blanket.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just add that nothing, I mean, almost literally nothing that we have actually talked about here, from the panel, from the presentations, from the example projects, would exist without good collaboration between a variety of groups. You know, any single project that we put out there on the street, for it to be successful, you know, there are half a dozen different people that have to play nicely to make it work. And, you know, we've always been very successful at being able to kind of get the right people in the right places with the right technologies at the right time. So, you know, without that type of collaboration, you know, we're just not in a world where you can necessarily go it alone and be successful in much of anything anymore.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We have a question directly for Andrew. Andrew, have you looked at any other alternative fuels, including compressed natural gas for your fleet?
We have not looked at any alternative fuels. We did have an RFP out for a diesel electric hybrid repower. That is something that there is much case study in our industry. It's something that our regulators, the Coast Guard, now have guidance out on. They have experience inspecting it. When it comes to alternative fuels, I think that the interest is high. I think that what a lot of people are going to look to is the Coast Guard for guidance. And I think if you talk to a lot of people and went out and bought them a drink, they'd probably say the Coast Guard tends to be a little bit behind on these things. But we have not looked into it yet. We've been to various meetings or conventions where we've heard people speak on it. But right now, our primary interest when it comes to alternative propulsion or cleaner propulsion is looking at case studies the Coast Guard has and looking at means of propulsion that the Coast Guard has good, clear guidance out on for us.
I can tell you from the bigger worldwide picture, Ryan, we're starting to see ships that are powered by wind, and we're seeing ships powered by LNG. And I'm talking, you know, big ships, 700-foot long, carrying, you know, tens of thousands of tons of cargo, not, you know, 100-foot long, whatever, pirate ships or something.
Yeah, that's something that's really taken the marine aspects by very fast. Now this question is going to be for Andrew. Andrew, which was the more important decision in how Wendella went to adopt sustainable solutions? Was it about reducing emissions or long-time cost savings or return on investment?
It's about all of those things. The company has a mission to operate as sustainable as possible. And we have benchmarks and goals when it comes to sustainability. And a lot of those are handed down to us by the Green Business Bureau, which is an organization we're a member of and is always challenging us to lower our carbon footprint. Now, when it comes to the sightseeing and tour and cruise side of the business, a lot of these suggestions or challenges are very easy because budgets are much bigger. It's a profitable enterprise. When it comes to the taxi side of the fleet, the goal when it comes to profitability is just to break even. And this does make it hard to have these upfront capital costs, and it makes it even harder in some remarks to cut our emissions when we're always looking at the budget. The DERA program was extremely helpful for us. It did allow us to repower sooner than we would have otherwise. It allowed us to repower fully as opposed to do the biannual engine overhauls year after year after year. And as I said, one of the 3 projects we did was a vessel built in 1962 that had engines that were over 50 years old. They had been overhauled so many times, but you can imagine how inefficient that engine was. And then one other thing to add is that when we did repower, one of the things we also did with these 3 boats is we also moved them down in horsepower. On the Chicago River, you're going very slow, almost at idle speed the entire time. So when we repowered, we kept this in mind. We repowered with much smaller horsepower engine packages. We were also able to configure the gear reduction so that even if we're idling, our engine is still operating at a more efficient speed. So we're able to make those tweaks as well. But I would say obviously it all is important. And you know, when we do repower these boats, it is a better quality of commute for our riders, which in turn increases ridership. And that also cuts down tons of greenhouse gas emissions. You know, we can tell you using the EPA's calculator how much the repowers have saved from our boats, but what's even harder to quantify is our massive increase in ridership as we invest in our fleet, all those cars that are being left at home, all those people that are taking the train now to get to the boat. So it kind of creates this positive feedback loop. And like I said, if you can imagine, if only a quarter of the vessels in the nationwide domestic passenger vessel fleet were to be repowered, the cumulative effect on these emissions would be substantial.
Thank you. This one last question, and it's directed at Joe or Shawn. Can you discuss why the EPA certification is important in these partnerships, and especially when we have all these different new technologies coming to the market? Why is that EPA certification kind of the certifying for everything that's coming to the national platform?
Well, I'll jump in on the front end. From the funding standpoint, it's really twofold. First and foremost, the DERA program has a specific requirement that the equipment is EPA verified or certified. And so it's kind of a non-starter if it's not. But the reason that is important is as we all go through a process, and the US EPA's diesel emission quantifier has been mentioned a few times, when we look at trying to calculate what the real emission reduction potential of a project is, we need to be able to do that with technology that has verified and been certified to reduce by that amount. So when an application, for example, comes into my office for funding, you know, when we go to the EPA's deck and make that run, we can feel confident that based on the inputs that we provided, those are viable, real world emission reductions that would be the result of this project.
I can add to that as well from an engine manufacturer standpoint and a compliance standpoint. You know, Cummins has above 1,500 horsepower Tier 4 final engines in the world in mining, right? Power generation. But if it's not certified by the EPA we're going to use switch for an example here, it's not tested in that application, and you know, we won't even sell the product. We don't know how it will work. It's not been tested. We have no quality assurances whatsoever. If you were just to take, you know, the technology that's in the engines now is so much different than it was when it was just iron and combustion. And we need to know that it's going to successfully work inside of the package that it's put in, and you're not going to have issues with, you know, very expensive components like aftertreatment.
Thank you very much. And that's going to do it for our Q&A session here. Once again, thank you again to our speakers for sharing your expertise regarding the sustainable ports and goods movement operations. And if you'd like to connect with any of them after today, their contact information is available on the slide. Coming up, please be sure to register for the 3rd and 4th installments of the upcoming webinar series hosted in partnership with Wisconsin Clean Cities, Chicago Area Clean Cities, and Greater Lansing Clean Cities. We have the Clean Diesel Applications webinar on Wednesday, March 17th from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central, and on the non-road equipment operations webinar, that's going to take place on Wednesday, April 7th from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Central. And please be sure to register for the Transportation Energy Partners webinar coming up tomorrow, Thursday, February 25th from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Central. Also, as a final reminder, the Clean Cities annual surveys are due by Tuesday, March 2nd of this year. Please feel free to visit our website for more information and learn more about upcoming webinars and funding. Once again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you again to our speakers for your participation. If there are any questions later on for our speakers, please feel free to contact us directly and we will be happy to assist you. Have a great day, and thank you everyone very much.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you everyone.